العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد الأمين نبي الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته والتابعين لهم بإحسان يوم الدين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. تابعوا الدرس الماضي، من فاته فليرجع إليه وليراجعه كما قلت المرة بعد المرة.
بسم الله، الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
قد مضى درسان.
We have completed 2 classes, one last week and one this morning of the
اثنين اليوم لأن المقدمة.
نعم. The introduction and the first part started today. So whoever missed those 2 classes, inshallah, go back and review them, go over them again.
شروط الصوم أوجبه بالشهر وباحتلامه، يعني أن الشهر لا يجب صومه إلا بثبوته، هذا واضح، وكذلك بالبلوغ.
So what are the conditions of Ramadan or fasting Ramadan being obligated? The conditions of it being obligated are that the month came in
بالثبوت الماضي
according to the conditions mentioned before, the ways of establishing it that we mentioned before, or by reaching puberty. Those are the 2 conditions of Ramadan being obligatory.
وشرط الصحة وصح بالعقل وبالإسلام. صح بالعقل، لا يصح الصوم إلا بالعقل، فمن بدأ يومه وهو فاقد العقل ذلك اليوم لا يصح منه.
And the conditions of it being accepted, the conditions of fasting being accepted, or of the fasting being accepted is number 1, the sanity, for a person to be in a sound mental state, and if a person begins the fast while they're not, or the day begins while they're not in a sane mental state, then their fast does not count for them.
أو غاب جل اليوم ولو كان حاضرا في أوله.
Or let's say that they were or that their mind was not present for most of the day.
ولو كان حاضرا في أول الوقت، ولو كان العقل موجودا في أول الوقت.
Even if they were sane at the beginning of the day.
صح بالعقل وبالإسلام، يعني أن الصوم أيضا لا يصح إلا بالإسلام، فالكفار مخاطبون بالفروع على الصحيح على مذهب جمهور العلماء.
شيخ، هذا يعني إن كان مجنون أو سكران أو
لا، المجنون نعم، أو سكران أو غايب عقله كمثل مخدر، وكل هذا لا يصح.
So if somebody was
لكن يقضي فقط.
نعم. If somebody was insane, if they were drunk at the beginning of the day or a part of the day, if they were anesthetized, that they were knocked out intentionally,
أو مغمى عليه,
they were in a coma, etc., then they are then their fasting is not
صحيحا
is not correct.
صح بالعقل وبالإسلام كذلك أيضا يشترط في صحة الصوم الإسلام، فالكافر إذا صام لا يقبل منه أي شيء، لأن الشهادتين شرط الباقيات من الإسلام.
And another condition of it being accepted is Islam, to be a Muslim.
فالكفار مخاطبون بالفروع لكنها لا تصح منهم إلا بالإسلام.
So the disbelievers are held accountable for the right and wrong and halal and haram, except that they are not the good deeds are not accepted from them without Islam.
شرطه الإسلام، ونتيجة ذلك أن الواحد منهم إذا بلغته الصلاة والطهارة والصوم تركه وترك الإسلام يزداد العذاب يعني عليه يوم القيامة. وشرط القبول ذلك قال تعالى: ما سلككم في سقر؟ قالوا لم نكن من المصلين ولم نكن نطعم المسكين وكنا نخوض مع الخائضين وكنا نكذب بيوم الدين. النتيجة أنهم مخاطبون بالفروع هي لا تصح منهم، ولكن نتيجة لماذا نقول مخاطبون ولا تصح منهم؟
نعم.
هم عندما يدخلون النار فسيعاقبون عقابين: عقاب على ترك الإسلام وعلى ترك أيضا الفروع المتعلقة به.
And the proof from the Quran that shows that the disbelievers are punished for doing wrong.
ما سلككم في سقر؟ سؤال من الملائكة في أوساط جهنم.
But not. هذا سؤال من الملائكة وهذا سؤال من
رب العالمين. السبب
هذا ما سلككم في سقر؟
ما هو السبب اللي أدخلكم في سقر؟
نعم. that the proof that they are held accountable is that they would be asked while they're in hellfire. They said that it will be asked, what ended you in the hellfire? We did not used to be among those who were praying, and we did not feed the poor. We did not. We used to be idle. And so when they say we did not believe in the day of recompense, but they are mentioning as part of the reason they're in hellfire those sins that they had done, that shows that they are held accountable. And we used to be among the ones who prayed. That means they are held accountable for the things that a person is held accountable for, while it being that those deeds would not be accepted for them if they did them without the condition of Islam.
نعم. ونية سابقة للفجر. شرط صحة الصوم أن ينوي الإنسان الصوم قبل الفجر، أن يكون في باله أنه سيصبح صائما قبل الفجر ولو قبله بثانويات.
And another of the conditions of fasting is that the intention must be present before Fajr in that previous night. في تلك الليلة.
نعم. ولو قبل الفجر بثانويات.
Even if it
من
was
غروب
before.
الشمس إلى طلوع الفجر.
Even if it was before Fajr by a few minutes. So it has to be between Maghrib to sometime between Maghrib and between Fajr that they had the
في
intention.
بالي أنه سيصبح صائم فقط.
That they put in their
وليس واحد
mind.
يفكر ويقول أنا سأصبح صائم فقط.
It's not the deep thinking and pondering that I'm going to be fasting tomorrow. It's just that they even briefly make the intention that they're fasting the next day.
نعم. ونية سابقة للفجر في كل صوم سواء كان نفلا أو واجبا لا بد أن تسبق نية الفجر. تسبق نية الفجر.
And this applies to all fasting, not the fasting of Ramadan.
إذا كان لديك سؤال خلي حتى يكون في آخر الدرس، قد تسمعه قد يكون هنا. وكيف فقط عندك كل سؤالك خليه عندك. حضره عندك.
Write down your questions.
حتى قد تسمعه في أثناء الدرس. بكل صوم وكفت في الشهر. إذا كان الصوم واجب كمثل رمضان تكفي نية واحدة بمذهب مالك خلافا لغيره، معناها واجب أن تنوي أنك ستصوم الشهر كله خلاص، إلا إذا حدث مانع كالحيض فتنوي النية لباقيه أو مرض فتنوي النية لباقيه.
So then, except the month of Ramadan is the exception, in fact, to this rule.
لازم تجددها كل ليلة.
That you don't need to renew the intention every night unless that fasting is cut off.
فقط إذا نويت من أول الشهر أنك ستصوم كفاك ذاك.
So then if you had the intention from the beginning of the month
أنك ستصومه كله
to fast the whole month and your fasting doesn't get cut off, you don't break your fast anytime in the middle, you don't have an excuse that you have to stop fasting, then you don't need to renew the intention every single night. Automatically the intention is there only for the month of Ramadan. But it is still preferred to renew the intention every night.
ككل صوم واجب التتابع، كل صوم واجب التتابع كما رمضان. مثال ذلك لا تحتاجونه الآن كالظهار. أعوذ بالله، واحد قال لزوجته أنها عليه كظهر أمه، هذا أحيانا يكفر بالصوم. هذا واجب التتابع.
This exception is not made just for Ramadan. This exception is for any fasting that requires multiple days of fast. Any, like if a person, for example, they committed a sin that they're making up for that sin by fasting and so on, that there's particular sins that the expiation of them,
واحد قال لأمي أنت علي كظهر أمي.
such as dhihar, then a person would be wouldn't be obligated to renew the fast. All of those things will be mentioned because this is a chapter of fasting, not just the fasting.
للتطوع.
قلت شيخ في رأي آخر في هذا.
رأي الشافعية وغيرهم يقولون، غير مالك يقول إنه واجب تجديد النية كل ليلة لأن هذه العبادات عنده ما هي واحدة، كل يوم مستقل.
Imam Shafi'i and possibly others, they say that no, every day, every single night, the intention needs to be made independently and the
لذلك يندب في مذهب مالك تجديدها كل ليلة خروجا من الخلاف.
So regardless, then it is preferred to renew the intention every night, even in Ramadan, because of this difference of opinion.
والطهر كذلك أيضا من شروط صحة الصوم الطهر من الحيض أو النفاس. فإن كانت المرأة حاضرة يحرم عليها أن تصوم مطلقا ولا يصح له فعالة.
And another prerequisite or condition of the acceptance of fasting is to be pure from menstruation and postpartum bleeding.
قبل الفجر لا بد أن يرتفع عن الحيض قبل الفجر ولا يرتفع عنها بعد الفجر ذلك اليوم باطل لا تصومه مطلقا.
So then to be pure from that before Fajr comes in, if Fajr comes in and then the woman
تكمل ذلك اليوم شرابا وطعاما ما عندها حرج
even a
وجماعا
few moments later that she becomes pure, then still that day is not counted for her in fasting.
ممكن تشرب بقيته كأنها مفطرة ولكن تقضي فيما بعد.
But in that case she is able to eat and drink and so on and make up the day later.
وصح قبل الفجر بعد الطهر وصح قبل الغسل قبل الطهر. صح الصوم إذا انتهى عن الحيض قبل الفجر ولو بدقيقة ولكنها لم تغتسل بعد الفجر لا علاقة له ما في حرج.
So then if she becomes pure before Fajr by a few moments, then she must fast the next day even if she
لكن لا يشترط لصحة الصوم أن تغتسل قبل الفجر.
Regardless her making ghusl or not making ghusl, being in a pure state as in making ghusl like a state of purification from the impurity, the ritual impurity, that is not a condition. But the condition is not being in a state of menstruation or postpartum bleeding. So if she makes ghusl after Fajr, that's fine. She still must fast that day.
Is the fast accepted?
Yes. لأنها نوت قبل الفجر. خلاص انتهى.
Because the intention is there. If a person entered into
هي طهرت قبل الفجر. هي طهرت قبل الفجر. وترك إخراج كذلك أيضا وترك إخراج المني الداعي والقيء والمذي أو الجماع. كذلك أيضا.
Maybe I wasn't clear enough in the translation. I said that if the menstruation or the postpartum bleeding stops before Fajr, then she must fast the next day.
نوت تنوي ذلك الوقت
Regardless of ghusl, being in a state of ghusl, wudu, whatever that has nothing to do with fasting, she makes the intention before after she becomes pure, and she fasts the next day. Even if it was moments before Fajr, she makes the intention. Then after Fajr, then during Fajr time, she goes and makes her ghusl and everything.
ولو بعد يوم هذا شيء آخر يعني الطهارة لا تعلم.
Even if she doesn't astaghfirullah pray the whole day and the next day she purifies herself, still that fasting is a different matter.
You said the next day meaning the fast that's coming in.
Yeah, the fast that's coming in.
After
that day.
Fajr. No.
That day that you know.
No.
شيخ وهل يندب لها أن تترك الطعام والشراب؟
لا الحيض لا يندب لها.
يعني يندب لها إن طهرت بعد الفجر.
لا يندب لها.
So if a woman is menstruating or bleeding, postpartum bleeding, any time during the day,
من السفر لا يندب لها.
Or a person is coming back from traveling and so on, the ruling for them in that case is that they can eat and drink for the rest of the day despite it being Ramadan, and it is not even preferred or recommended for them to fast for the remainder of the day.
وترك إخراج المني الداعي أيضا من شرط أيضا صحة الصوم أن يترك اللذة التي تخرج المني. إخراج المني لو أخرج المني ولو بلذة بسيطة قبلة أو فكر هذا يبطل صومه. إخراج المني أو المذي.
So then also one of the conditions of the fasting being accepted is that the person does not take out from their body sexual fluids, either major or minor. In the Maliki method, in argument, this is both can cause the fasting to be broken. Whether it's the major fluid, which is the mani, or the minor fluid that is just due to arousal, which is called madhi.
وأما الشافعية والشافعي وأكثر الجهابذي لا يوجب القضاء لديهم المذي. الشافعي وأكثر العلماء يقول لا يجب القضاء بالمذي.
As for the Shafi'i and most of the scholars, they say that this is that the madhi, the minor sexual fluid, the clear prostatic fluid for men, and the clear just minor fluid that is not the major fluid, that does not break the fast according to Imam Shafi'i and the other scholars.
والقيء كذلك أيضا القيء ترك إخراج الطعام بالقيء لو أخرجه أفسد نهاره أيضا.
هذا القيء إن كان
عن عمد أخرجه عمدا وأما
إخراج يعني فإن كان
غالبة
إن كان المذي مثلا
إذا كان بدون أي نية كمثل النوم أو كمثل لذة غير معتادة لا يضر. لابد أن يكون بلذة معتادة.
The word over here,
إرادة إخراج إفعال.
The word إخراج meaning that intentionally causing the or engaging in an act that would cause that fluid to come out. Whether it's by touching, whether it's by fantasizing, whether it's by whatever that a person حتى في التفكر.
نعم.
That whether
استدام التفكر معناه داوم.
That a person's intentionally, constantly, not a thought passed by, no, but they're intentionally
صار يرجع الفكرة في محاسن زوجته.
Fantasizing. Then this causes that to come out, then it breaks the fast. But if somebody, for example, is sleeping and then
أو خرج بدون أي لذة,
or somebody's sleeping or it comes out for just without his desire, without his intention,
أو بلذة غير معتادة,
or due to some unusual reason, not intentionally doing so, or something that is unusual, then then it does not break his fast. Same goes for vomiting. People misunderstand that any vomiting will break your fast. No, it's ikhraj, meaning intentionally taking it out.
أخرجه عمدا.
So those fluids, these are the fluids intentionally, if you take them out, they break the fast.
وكذلك الجماع عمدا.
Also, just the simple act of intercourse itself, regardless of completion, it breaks the fast.
أما إذا نسي أنه صائم وجامع هذا بطل صومه ولكن لا يكفر لا شيء آخر سنتكلم.
So it's
كذلك الجماع يبطل الصوم مطلقا.
Completion regardless of intercourse regardless of completion, but if somebody forgets that they're fasting
ولو نسيانا,
and they have that intercourse, then it still breaks their fast, but in that case of forgetfulness, they do not owe the expiation, which we'll mention what the kaffara or expiation is.
نعم واجب على الإنسان أن يستمر ولو أخرج المنية ولو أخرج القيء ولو جامع
حتى
عمدا واجب عليه أن يستمر.
So if the person intentionally breaks his fast in any of these ways, or forgetfully breaks their fast by any of these means, then they must continue. Then they must abandon it once they realize or repent. So the only difference between forgetfulness and intentionally doing those acts is that if a person forgets, they do not have to pay the expiation or do the expiation.
نعم. نسيان لا في الفرض يوجب القضاء. ثم بين المؤلف الفرق بين النسيان وبين العبد في هذه الأمور.
So he mentions here the difference between forgetfulness and intentionality.
نسيان لا في الفرض يوجب القضاء. هذا الفرض إذا نسي فيه الجماع أو إخراج الماني أو القيء أو هذا يوجب القضاء، أو الأكل أو الشرب يوجب القضاء في الفرض، أما التطوع فلا يجب فيه القضاء. هذا مذهب مالكي.
As far as the Maliki madhab in this matter, as opposed to other than him, he says that that he says if somebody forgets eating, drinking, or involved in sexual actions, etc., and then if it's in fard, then of course a person is forgetful, so he's not held accountable, he's not in sin, but he still must make up the day. So he understood that that he doesn't have to. He's not in sin and he doesn't have to do the kafara, but he still has to make up the day, even though it was just forgetfulness.
He finished the fast and then he still have to make it.
He must finish the fast and must make up that day, but doesn't owe anything else.
كاستبقي مما استاك أو تمضمض كذلك من كان يتمضمض ويستاك أشياء كالسبق مما استاك أو كذلك واحد كان يستاك فأخطأ وسبقه بينه أو المضمضة دخل في فمه من شيء بدون قصد يجب عليه القضاء ولكن لا كفارة عليه.
So then, such as the person who accidentally is using a miswak, not a flavored miswak, not toothpaste, that's something else, that's intentional. Swallowing, you know you're going to swallow some of it, that's a different story. As far as if somebody is using a miswak, like a dry miswak, a normal miswak, that they shouldn't be swallowing anything from it, but then something breaks off and they swallow it. Or somebody's making wudu and they're making madmada, and then they accidentally swallow some of the water, then in this case that's considered unintentional. Their fasting is broken in the Maliki madhab, but they only make up the day, they don't pay the kafara since it was unintentional.
والشك في الفجر أو الغروب كذلك من أفطر وهو شاك في الغروب أو من سحر وهو شاك في الفجر بطل صومه. هذا يقع لكم كثيرا. من أفطر وهو شاك في الغروب أو سحر وهو شاك في الفجر.
So if somebody breaks their fast while they're doubting, like at Maghrib, or somebody eats while they're doubting that Fajr came in or not, this breaks the fast. حتى إن لم يدخل الفجر.
إذا تبين أنه لم يدخل الفجر ما في مشكلة. إذا تبين بعد ذلك.
وإذا تبين المغرب قد دخل.
هكذا يسلم.
So this is actually this is in the case of that they were doubtful and it turns out that.
لم يتبين له بعد ذلك الصواب.
نعم. That if it turns out that it was Fajr while they were eating, then that's considered like the forgetful one. But if it turns out that it wasn't Fajr while they were eating, then their fasting still would count.
وهذا مما يجب علينا أن نعرف أن نتعلم أحكام أوقات الطهارة، أوقات الصلاة وأوقات الصيام، لأن الإنسان والجهل أشد من الشرك.
Same goes for Maghrib as well. And unfortunately, ignorance is worse.
لأنه لا يعذر به، لا يعذر بالجهل في هذه الأمور.
Ignorance is worse than doubt, because the person.
لأن الجهل كالعمد، معدود كالعمد في الضروريات.
Because look over here, he's mentioning doubt under forgetfulness.
هو يعرف أوقات الدخول، هو يعرف الدخول.
The person knows when the prayer enters and knows when it leaves, knows when Maghrib enters, knows how, but then they're doubtful: did it enter? Did it not?
هذا هو الشك.
Eating and then they see it.
أما ذلك الجهل.
That's called doubt. So doubt falls under forgetfulness. As far as ignorance, it may appear similar, but it's not. Ignorance falls under intentional breaking of the fast. الجهل كالعمد في الضروريات لا يعذر بالجهل. In regard to the
في الضروريات الطهارة والصلاة والصيام لا يعذر بالجهل.
In regard to the fard, in this case, and some other cases, doubt is the same as forgetfulness. In other cases, but in the cases of ignorance is counted as intentionally disregarding any fard act. So if somebody was ignorant of the prayer time, and then they ate, and then somebody tells him, "Oh look, the prayer time came in, you don't see it," because he was ignorant, that's not an excuse, and he will be counted like he intentionally broke his fast.
لأنه لا يجوز تقليد غير العدول العارفين بالأوقات.
Because if somebody is eating or breaking their fast and following,
they
didn't see the sign by themselves, they're following some calculation, they're following something, are you allowed to copy in Islam? You must copy a trustworthy a source that knows the Islamic rulings and regulations.
وجاز في الصيام والصلاة تقليد عدل عارف الأوقات.
So it needs to be an upright person, number one, and a knowledgeable.
ولكن أين العدل؟ ابحثوا لنا عن العدل.
But look for upright people nowadays.
وابحثوا عن المطبق للأحكام.
And look for the people who are properly implementing the rulings.
ولو أعلم من الشيطان.
even if they have more knowledge than the shaitan.
لا فائدة فيه.
There's no benefit in
ذاك
such
شيطان
knowledge.
من الإنس.
There's no benefit in such knowledge from a shaitan of the human being.
ليس في فتواه مفتي يتبع إن لم يضيف للعلم والدين الورع. لا
There's
يجوز
no following of the opinion or the
عالم
fatwa of any scholar if they are not known for righteousness and piety and knowledge. Even if they are very extremely knowledgeable, still they must be implementing the knowledge.
ولو يفسر جميع القرآن على الروايات العشرين.
Even if he can explain the whole Quran according to 20 and recite it in 20 different narrations, still.
ولو يفسر الأحاديث جميعها بأوجهها بجميع المذاهب كلها.
Even if he's able to explain every single hadith according to every single madhab.
ويحفظ المذاهب الأربعة.
And became a scholar in the four madhabs.
يحفظ ليس سكارج.
Memorized.
وذلك مستحيل عليكم أن تحفظوا الأخضر الآن.
And memorized the.
وأنتم مستحيل عليكم أن تحفظوا الصوم. علماءكم مستحيل عليهم أن يحفظوا فصلا من الفصول. تعلم أنت تعلم. من تسمون علماء يستحيل عليهم يحفظوا فصلا من الفصول.
The people that you're calling scholars, they do not even memorize. They cannot even memorize. It's impossible for them. They don't have the ability to memorize one chapter of knowledge.
ولا يحفظون جزءا من القرآن.
And they do not properly memorize one juz of the Quran properly.
مستحيل. هذا شيء من المستحيل.
It appears impossible.
لا يحفظون جزءا من العلماء. شو هذا؟
A scholar who doesn't memorize properly cannot recite properly one juz of the Quran.
هذا عارف.
How is this a scholar?
تعرف. أبوكنا عارف. هذا علماء المفتون. أبوكنا أنت تعرف. اللي لو كنت معهم مفتون يحفظون جزءا من القرآن. أنت كنت
The people that you were with.
أنت كنت معهم أخبرتني كنت معهم.
That you were with them and you told me you were with them, scholars or muftis who are not able to properly recite one juz of the Quran.
أنت تعلم.
You know them.
وجئتني من عندما قلت كنت مع كم من مفتي اليوم. يكلمك ما يتم هاوني مفتي وسوسه. لا يمكن أن يقرأ جزءا من القرآن حتى في المصحف. يقولوا ذلك. كأنها تريد وان جزء في المصحف. تشو بهؤلاء المفتون. والله كل يوم بعد يوم أكره المفتين. وكل يوم بعد يوم أكره علماءكم. ما أجرأكم على النار؟ ترجم.
I swear day after day I increase in my despising of your muftis and your so-called scholars.
ما أجرأكم على النار؟
How bold are they towards the fire?
والله إن مقاعدكم في جهنم جاهزة. والله الذي لا إله إلا هو.
I swear by Allah, your positions, your places in hellfire are prepared.
من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار.
Whoever lies about me intentionally, then he should await his place in hellfire.
حديث البخاري ومسلم رواه أكثر من 60 وقد رواه حديثه من كذب أكثر من 60 ممن صحبه.
There are more than 60 companions who narrated this hadith. One of the most authenticated hadiths.
وقد رواه حديثه من كذب أكثر من 60 ممن صحبه.
More than 60 of the companions narrated this.
من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار.
Whoever lies about me intentionally,
تكذبون على الرسالة تقول محدث كذابون.
then let him await his place in hellfire.
تكذبون على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تقول محدث تقول مفتي تقول عالم.
You're saying you're a mufti or alim or whatever, and muhaddith, and you're lying about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
من هم العلماء ورثة الأنبياء؟ عالم لا يحفظ حديث ولا يحفظ جزء من القرآن.
The scholars are the heirs of the Prophet, so how could a scholar be one who does not properly memorize one chapter of the Quran and does not memorize hadiths?
هذا مما كل درس دخلته ولو درس فقه أغضب عليكم. ولو درس سيرة. هذا جنون.
Even if it's a fiqh class, even if it's a seerah class, subhanallah, it shows my reasons for my anger with these people.
والشك بالبطيء أو الغروب أو ابتلاع البلغم المغلوب هذا غير مشهور. قالوا أن من ابتلع البلغم أنه يفطر عمدا ولكن مشهور أنه مكروه.
So he says also the one who swallows
البلغم بعد وصوله إلى فمه.
the saliva after it wells up in plentiful amounts or in the mouth. So this is, he mentions here as if it is something that breaks the fast, while the mashhur is in fact that it is just disliked to swallow that saliva.
ولا قضاء في غالب من مذي أو قيء هذا اللي كنت أسأل عنه أو بلغم ومني قال لا قضاء في غالب خرج غلبة من مذي أو قيء إذا لم يبتلعه وكذلك المني إذا خرج غلبة بدون هذا شيء.
So and there's no makeup of the fast necessary if it was beyond a person uncontrollably came out of them, either and not due to actions of their own that led up to it, uncontrollably came out of them, madi, which is prostatic fluid, seminal fluid, or vomit.
إذا لم يبتلع منه شيء بعد وصول إلى فمه.
Of course, for vomit, so long as they didn't swallow any of it intentionally after it reached their mouth.
وسواء قالوا يلزمه القضاء ولكن لا كفارة.
Intentionally or unintentionally.
أو من بلغم كذلك البلغم.
Or from saliva or.
أو مني.
Or from يعني حتى هذا
نعم.
Or what's it called mucus or. If that intentionally is swallowed, or if somebody out of their control and not through any action of their own, they release major sexual fluid. When I say that, I mean for men and women. That's why I don't use the male term. Many refers to both the male and female major fluid.
النساء والشقائق والرجال في هذا.
That men and women both have the same word that is used.
هذا ماذا قال؟ ولا ذباب غبرة الطريق كذلك الذباب لو دخل بدون اختيار دخل غلبة فلا شيء فيه أو غبار الطريق إذا تحفظ منه من يمشي في البوادي أو في المدن المتلوثة يمشي في غبار وهو يحاول ولكن أحيانا يستنشق الغبار بدون قصد أو الذباب يدخل في فمه بدون قصد ويبتلعه فلا حرج في ذلك لا شيء.
So this is called the ghalaba, which means that when it is overwhelmed, it's not intentional and it's not forgetful. It's just something that they're unable to stop. When it happens in regard to medi or vomit or snot or whatever or many or a fly, a fly just jumps into his mouth, flies into his mouth. And he's unable to take it out, or a dust. He's covering his mouth as he's passing dust to prevent it, but then still dust enters his mouth.
أو الجبسي صانع الإسمنت هذا مع التحفظ.
Or somebody who's making like plaster, dealing with a powder, adding water to it, and so on, or flour, for example. Same thing. Excuse me. And some of it it's in the dust everywhere. It's in there's like clouds of it, and a person is gonna swallow it, and they're unable to stop that. Then مع التحفظ حتى الدقيق. So, but they have to take some precaution to prevent swallowing it. But if they take the precaution, still they're gonna swallow. That's forgiven.
وخمسة في عمدها تكفر. خمسة إذا عمدها يكفر الإنسان وسيبينها. إلا بتأويل إلا إذا كان عنده تأويل بها.
And there are 5 things that are intentionally done, then the kafara, the expiation must be done. إلا بتأويل كفاية.
كم الواحد سنبين التأويل إلا لمعنى يعتمد عليه وليس حقائق العذر ولكن سنبينه.
Except if they misunderstood.
سنبين ذلك.
Explain the misunderstanding that may remove the kafara.
إلا لعذر يصرف عن ذلك وسنبينه.
What we're going to explain إن شاء الله.
في رمضان هذا خاصة في رمضان. كفارة خاصة في رمضان.
Especially in Ramadan. Ramadan is where the kafara applies, the expiation applies. So I forgot to mention that in the case of somebody forgetfully breaking their fast and it's not Ramadan, they don't have to make up that day. Only for Ramadan do they have to make up the day if they unintentionally or forgetfully broke their fast. So if it was outside Ramadan, they don't have to. So then he says also the kafara, of course, anything that has to do with expiation, you already know it's in regard to expiation of the sin of intentionally breaking the fast. So understand what the kafara means. Know the word kafara, expiation, kafara.
في رمضان قط باختياري ليس غلبة ليس مكرها ولا شيء ولا مريضا لا.
And this is kafara only applies in Ramadan.
بدون نسيان وباختيار.
Only intentionally.
أما الإكراه واحد مكره على ذلك ما في حق ما في حق.
Somebody is forced, if somebody forgets, if somebody whatever, it's intentionally out of free choice. In fact.
باختياري. فرفع النية بالنهار. رفض النية بالنهار. هذا أول مكفرات. ترك النية بالنهار. رفض النية بالنهار.
So the number one, the first thing that requires expiation, if done freely out of free choice in the Ramadan, is to intend not to fast during the day. To intend that I'm not going to fast today. Or eating, or drinking, all intentionally. Not accidentally.
أو من جماعا أو مني القصد أو من جماع أو مني القصد
or from intercourse or from intentional release of mani, major sexual fluid. These 5 things.
وهي على التخيير يعني أن الكفارة على التخيير بين هذه المسائل.
And the expiation is done. What does a person do to expiate the sin of doing these 5 things intentionally by free choice? They have some choices of how they expiate the sin. So for each day, they can. The choice number 1 is for each day that they broke their fast intentionally, they feed 60 poor people. 60 poor people, 1 mud, which is based on the handful of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
أو صوم شهرين عن كل يوم متواليين.
He fasts 2 months.
متتابعين.
2 consecutive months, meaning 60 days or 2 months consecutively, like without breaking 1 day in between. For each day he broke his fast.
Is it 60 days or 2 months? Because what if 2 months are 29?
يمكن if you تبدأ بالشهر ما في مشكلة. Yeah, if you start with month, you will start with.
So if somebody begins those, it's standard is 60 days, but if somebody wants to do it 2 months and they start at the first of a new month and they fast for that month and the next month, then that counts as 2 months, even if it doesn't end up being 60 days.
So you have to fast 2 months straight, or you can split it.
It must be straight.
Straight, okay.
فلا بد أن يبدأ في بداية الشهر أن يريد شهرين شهرين.
نعم.
So it has to be from the beginning. You can't just in the 15th say, oh, I'm fasting 2 months.
If you take from the 15th, you have to complete it 30 days.
60 days.
كل ما شهر واحد كل شهر واحد. إذا بدأت الشهر بحسب الشهر. إذا بدأت مع شهر ولو واحدا محسوب إذا جاء 29. كل شهر استقلالي. فإذا أنت بدأت في 15 يوما. لذلك الشهر كمل 60 هلال. ولكن الشهر الذي بعده لو جاء ناقصا ما في حرج. لو أنت لنا.
So then if there's any whatever full month that you fast, you can discount the days that it was not that it came short of 30. So if you start fasting on the 15th, no.
لكن لابد أن تكمله 30.
So that one you have to fast 30 days.
فإذا اتبعته بذلك الشهر الآخر وظهر أنه 29 عادي.
So then if you are fasting 60 days and you start in the 15th, then you fast in that one you count 50. It doesn't matter how many days. Then the next month, so that month you have to count for 30 days. So then the next month, if it turns out to be 29, then then you count it as a full month, and then you're going to fast now whatever remainder from 30 is from the first month to make that up in the next month, and that's it.
But just to be clear, you can't do like Safa and then wait until Shaban to do the second one. You have to do it like Muharram and Safa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, so 15 days, and then the new month starts. You fast the new month, and then whatever was left over, from the first month.
So
you
how many
make
days
it
did you
up.
fast in the first month? Okay.
Yeah.
13. Well, now you have to do 27. 17. You 5, 25.
وصام شهرين ولاء نسقا أو مؤمنا رقا سليما اعتقا أو يعتق عبد يعني مؤمن مسلم سليما ما ليس بأعمى ولا بإبكمة ولا ناقصا ناقصا كذا.
The third choice for kafara or expiation of broken fast, intentionally broken out of free choice, is freeing a slave, a healthy slave that is a believer.
ومن توانى بقضاء رمضان
سليما يعني
ليس أقطع اليدين وليس أعمى وليس أبكم وليس أصم. هذا شيء لا يوجد. ومن توانى في قضاء رمضان بقضاء رمضان مفرطا حتى أتاه الثاني. هذا يقال الكفارة الصغرى. واحد فرط في قضاء رمضان، مرة كانت حائض، شخص كان مريضا مسافرا معذور وفرط في قضاء الأيام قبل أن يأتي رمضان آخر. هل يكون كل يوم قضاء يطعم مد، هي يقال المد الكفارة الصغرى.
ويقضي
لا شك فقط في التأخير. هذا سبب التأخير أنه لم يقضي حتى دخل رمضان.
فإن ترك الصيام سنوات
لا يتكرر عليه مرة واحدة.
لا يتكرر.
أنا كل شهر عندما يقضي من ذلك اليوم يقضي عنه. لو ترك يعني لو فرط في القضاء من 2 أو 3 ولم يقضي حتى مرت السنة الأخرى.
30 مدا لكل رمضان.
نعم. أو يومين لكل يومين بسبب ما ترك قضاءه. قد يكون ترك قضاء يومين أو شهرين، كل يوم يعطي عنه. إذا أخر صومه حتى دخل رمضان آخر عمدا ليس مريضا ولا ناسيا.
If somebody just lazily, due to no legitimate excuse, missed some owed some days, such as a woman who was on menstruating during part of Ramadan. She had maybe 10 days, 7 days, whatever to make up, and she made up maybe 5 of them. 2 of them are left over when the next Ramadan comes. She still hadn't made them over, and just due to neglect. Then for each day that remains left over of the previous Ramadan's fast, then the next Ramadan enters, and the next Ramadan enters
أخرت بدون نسيان وبدون عذر.
Without forgetfulness, without any excuse. Then each day the person and the individual owes one
عندما يقضي ذلك اليوم يعطي عنه مدة.
when they come to يعني بعد رمضان.
نعم طبعا.
فلا يستطيع أن يدفع قبله.
إذا دفع لا تجب عليه لكن إذا دفع له.
So it should be done ideally, but it's acceptable otherwise for them to pay this beforehand. But they pay it with they make up that day, of course, after Ramadan, and they pay for each day one mud of food.
That's one person.
One person, one mud of food per day.
So if they don't make up the fast before Ramadan comes in, then they owe one month.
Ramadan
عليه إيجاب لكل يوم إطعام مد مع قضاء الصوم. عليه يقضي الصوم ويطعم مع كل يوم مدا.
So then the person needs to make up the days, of course. If somebody missed a few days in Ramadan, due to an excuse, maybe they were sick or whatever, and then during that year, they made up some of the days, or they made up none of the days, but they owed some days still from the previous Ramadan that they still haven't made up when the next Ramadan came in, then they owe for each day that is left over that they have not made up of the previous Ramadan, 1 mud of food to the poor for each day.
What about if you have like consecutive years?
That's what I asked.
Oh, okay.
So I asked, what if you had consecutive years? That's why I worded it in a way that that question should not be asked. Because I said of the previous year.
I know, but what about the previous years?
I didn't say of the previous years.
Yeah.
I said of the previous 1 year. So if you have several years that this happens,
Yeah.
then
عليك 3 رمضان
No.
لم تصم
No.
وفرط في قضاء حتى جاء الصوم رمضان آخر تعطي عن كل فقط يوم يعني تعطي عنهم لكن تكرر السنة لا يزيد.
so it doesn't. So if several years pass, it doesn't add to it again. It's only when Ramadan starts, any owed day from the previous year, now you owe 1 month. So for 3 years somebody didn't fast, and each day of Ramadan was 30 days, then how many muds do they need to pay? 90, that's it.
Then you don't need to fast those days.
You do need to fast those days.
Oh, okay.
So I said we pay the mud ideally when you're making up the day.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But you can pay in advance.
كمرضع خافت على الصغير كذلك المرضع هي صحتها قوية ما عندها مشكلة لو كانت مريضة لا نتكلم عنها لكن هي صحيحة وخافت على الصغير لم يكتفي الصغير بالطعام ولم تجد شخص أخرى يرضعه لها وتضر بهذه الألبان.
نعم سامحني أن المثال كان سيء سامحني شيء.
تفضل.
The example was bad because it implies that if a person was sick the whole Ramadan and then they got better, then they owe those days. So if a person, it was 5 days from one, 10 days from the other, 15 days from the other that they were sick or they were unable to fast, days that they were excused for. We're talking about days the person is excused for. Unexcused, the kafara, we mentioned the kafara, but this is in regard to the days that a person is excused but they need to make up. That they just neglected making up those days. Not that they were willfully breaking their fast.
كمرضع خافت على الصغير كذلك هذا المرضع هي كانت صحتها غير طيبة هذا شيء هذه مريضة لكن إذا كانت المرضع صحيحة هي بنفسها لكن تخاف على الطفل ولد من المرض بسبب الرضاع لأن سينقص الرضاع واللبن يضر به ولا تجد أحدا آخر ولا يكتفي للطعام وهذه الألبان تضر به. هل تترك الصوم ولكن يجب عليها في المستقبل عندما تقضي الأيام تعطي مع كل يوم مدة.
هو سيذكر الحامل وهذا.
لا الحامل يجب على شيء.
So as far as the pregnant woman.
لا تكلم عنها. نحن نتكلم عن المرضع.
نعم هو سيذكر هذا.
الحامل لا يجب عليها شيء إذا كانت تخاف على الصحيح مثل مالك لا يجب.
لا يجب عليه قضاء.
إذا خافت على مسكين الخوف على مسيار المرض أو خافت على جنين لأنه كان جزء منها. في قول لك مشهور ما دامت تخاف على نفسها أو على ولدها.
So as far as the woman who's pregnant, she doesn't who fears any type of harm for herself or for her child. Then in the Maliki madhab she does not have to fast and she doesn't have to make up the day and she doesn't have to pay anything. So she must not make a kafara or she must not. I was like, I has to repeat it twice. So the common case of this would be for a woman who's pregnant, that she did not fast any of the days of Ramadan, that she was pregnant. So in that case, she doesn't pay anything. She just has to make up the day later on. But she doesn't have to pay anything. She doesn't have to. نعم.
هو الفرق بين الحامل والمرضع انهم كلهم ما
فقصده هنا المرضع لا المرضع التي انتظرت الى
هاي المرضع عنده ولد الان
So as far as that pregnant woman, she doesn't owe anything. If she needed to break her fast, she just needs to make up the day. As far as the woman who's breastfeeding, there's two types of women who are breastfeeding. There's the woman who's breastfeeding who break their fast. There's the woman who's breastfeeding who breaks her fast because of her own fear of health issues for herself. And in this case, because it's in regard to herself, she is excused from paying anything. She just has to make up the day when she is able. Just like she's just like the pregnant woman. But the difference between the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman is that now that the baby is born, if the fear of the breastfeeding woman is for the child, if she was pregnant, her fear is for the child is still a part of her. The child is still a part of her, so she doesn't have to pay anything. She just makes up the day. So if she's breastfeeding, if the fear is for herself, that's herself. She's like a sick person. She just makes up the day, doesn't have to pay anything. But if she's breastfeeding and she's healthy herself, she's not fearful of anything in regard to herself, but she's fearful in regard to the baby. And she doesn't have any alternatives to feed the baby, meaning that she doesn't have anybody to breastfeed the baby, because breastfeeding is still the thing. Or that there will be a harm due to giving them the formula or whatever food that they feed. Or that will not suffice them, or her milk will maybe not suffice the child. If the fear is in regard to the child, and the person needs to break their fast, then she would owe by default to make up the days, and she needs to pay a mud of food for every day that she broke her fast. فإن انتظرت إلى رمضان الآتي فالآن مدين على كل.
نعم لكن التفريط وكذلك.
So then if
إذا كان التقدير على الصوم.
So in this case, let's say she, half of Ramadan she broke her fast for fear for the child. So she owes 15 days. Then she's lazy with 10 of them until the next Ramadan. For those 10 days, for the 5 days that she made up, she still needs to pay 1 mud. For the 10 days that she did not make up lazily until the next Ramadan, if she didn't have an excuse, she owes the 1 day, 1 mud for breaking her fast, and she owes another mud for delaying unnecessarily to make it the makeup.
Breastfeeding breaks fast?
No. And no, some women break their fast to breastfeed because they need the energy, they need the food. So if it's in regard to fear for one's own health, that they're fasting, that they're like, if I fast while I'm breastfeeding, I'm gonna die, then, or I'm gonna be sick. But if the fear is for the child,
ما عنده شخص يرضع عنها ولا أو هناك من يدعو هناك يبين لك ما عنده ما تشتري به الأشياء خلاص
so then the woman who is he's giving a detail on when a woman who's breastfeeding can break her fast for the sake of her child is if she doesn't have
تؤجر به مرة أخرى وتشتري به الأشياء الكافية للولد.
If she doesn't have like the money to buy other food that is healthy for the baby, that the baby can eat, or drink or whatever, or to pay some woman to breastfeed the child at witness. Or even if the child is not going to drink from anybody else, then she can break her fast, but then she owes still. Then she still owes the mud per day that she breaks her fast by default, even if she makes it up right away. And now he mentions an opinion that is a weak opinion, that do not take this in the Maliki method, but it is an opinion that exists, that a pregnant woman who fears for her child still must make up the day and pay. No, actually the strong opinion is that she does not pay. If the fear is for the child, then she's pregnant.
ويستحب فدية للهرم أو عطش كلاهما لم يصم. هذا الهرم معناها ضعيف البنية، شخص ضعيف البنية لا يقدر على الصوم ككبير في السن، أو واحد عطش وصحته جيدة ولكن لا يقدر على إكمال الصوم بشدة العطش الطبيعية. هذا لا يجب عليه الصوم، لكن يندب له أن يعطي الفدية عن كل يوم مد واحد. الهرم معناها ضعف صار كبير مثلا.
So then,
تستحب ما يواجب المذهب مالك.
and it is not obligatory, but it is recommended to pay that fidya.
إطعام مد عن كل يوم.
To feed one mud for each day, for the.
الهرم الذي لا يقدر على الصوم كبير في السن.
هذه الفدية تكون مد واحد فقط. So it is recommended for the frail person. Generally, the word refers to an old person who is frail and unable to fast.
ليس مريضا هرم فقط ضعيف البنية.
It doesn't mean the person is sick. It means that the person is frail, that they're weak in their body. They're unable to handle fasting. Then it is not preferred for them. Then it is preferred for them to, pay, of course, they don't fast, but it's preferred for them to pay the fidya. Also, for the person who is
طبيعته العطش لا يقدر على تكملة الصوم.
The person who his nature is extremely thirsty, that he will become dehydrated very fast. He has some issue where he becomes dehydrated too fast and he's unable to fast. That neither of these cases the person should fast, but it is preferred for them to pay the fidya for each day, one mud of food.
نعم هذه المندوبات كذلك التعجيل كذلك التعجيل للفطور يندب أن يعجل الفطور بعد أن يتأكد من دخول الليل.
إذا كان الشخص يعني شغله يعني هو عطش بسبب الشغل.
يأخذ كل يوم من الصوم فإذا لم يقدر عليه يقطع تمرين النوم.
So as for the person who has work that is unavoidable, work that they need to do, and they may not be able to fast and they cannot last the whole day of fasting, then that person should fast for as long as they're able to fast. And once it comes to the point that really they're going to hurt themselves if they continue fasting, then they break their fast, and their ruling is like the same ruling as the sick person.
كذلك التعجيل للفطور كذلك بعد أن يتأكد الغروب يندب له أن يعجل الفطور. المندوبات.
And it is also recommended. Now he's listing the recommended things. Also, it is recommended to break your fast quickly as soon as you are sure that Maghrib came in.
التأخير للسحور مع بقية جزء من الليل تأكد جزء من الليل وحدوه بذروة ساعة.
And also to delay the suhoor that you
مع تأكد جزء من الليل باقي.
With a certainty that a part of the night remains, that you're sure that Fajr is not in yet. لآخر 20 دقيقة من
يقولون ثلث ساعة.
They're saying it's about 20 minutes before Fajr comes in. That's the ideal time for somebody to make their suhoor. Before the real Fajr time comes in. وأما وقت الفجر والمغرب.
شو؟ الناس هاي المشكلة الجاهلة. ناس تصوم وتصلي ولا تصلي ولا تصوم. هاي المشكلة. ناس يتعبون أنفسهم بلا فائدة. لا يتركون صوما ولا صلاة وهم ما صلوا ولا تطهروا. هاي رزية. الواحد مشتغل بالشهوات ومشتغل بالعبادة. خسر الدنيا والآخرة. ترجمة.
That subhanAllah, unfortunately, due to people's ignorance of the Maghrib times and the Fajr times, which are generally mostly wrong. Of course, Dhuhr time as well. In regard to fasting though, Maghrib time and Fajr time, the times he mentioned over here, most apps, 99% of apps, the default settings here, at least here in California, they are incorrect.
يتسابقون إلى التراوح وهم مكفرون.
So Maghrib comes in a little bit too early, so people break their fast before the time, trying to follow the hadith and this recommended action of breaking their fast as soon as possible. But they're not certain they're following the app. The app is not halal to follow on certainty. And then in regard to the Fajr time, they're following the app as well. The default setting, even though the app has many different settings you can choose from for Fajr, they don't care over here. They don't bother investigating what the time is in their area. And they keep eating until the Fajr time comes in on their app. And unfortunately, for about maybe 15 minutes or a little bit more, the time leave maximum like 17 minutes. The time Fajr has already come in before the app told them. So then they're saying, oh, I'm delaying my suhoor until the last 20 minutes. Well, you're eating 20 minutes into the daytime.
الحمد لله الناس مكفرة لا تترك جماعة ولا تراويح تتسابق على التراويح وهي تكفر الصيام.
So now that you know,
متعمدة على الإفطار.
You understand what is meant when it is said that people are competing to fast and competing to break their fast, and they're neither fasting nor breaking any fast that doesn't exist. And then what is the case of their prayer and their purification and their taraweeh and all of it?
ما فعلوا شيء. ما صلوا وما تركوا.
The actions are invalid. If you once you learn, you'll see that, oh well, the taraweeh was invalid, and oh, I shouldn't have been praying taraweeh at that time, and oh, my fasting was invalid, and oh, this was because people didn't even bother to learn before.
تعب مع ممارسة الكبائر.
People exhausting themselves
يعذبون أنفسهم في مقابل الحرام.
worship, but actually their worship is a major sin.
يعذبون أنفسهم في مقابل الكبائر.
Torturing themselves and what is being written in their book of deeds is major sins.
الله تعالى يقول قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, say, should I inform you of the ones who their actions are the greatest losers, the ones of the greatest loss, those who their strivings in this world are misguided, while they think that they are doing excellent deeds.
يعتقدون أنهم أقرب الناس إلى الله تعالى وهم أبعد الناس من الله تعالى.
They think they are the closest people to Allah while they are the farthest.
يقولون عندما يفطر الصائم للصائم فرحتان.
And they keep mentioning this hadith, oh, for the one who is fasting, it's 2 moments of rejoicing.
وليس له إذنان.
They have 2 sins in reality.
فرحتان بالمحرمات يفطر قبل الوقت.
And that he's making iftar before the time.
كفر وهو له فرحتان. هو بقي كل يوم طويل عطشان جائع وأفطر على الكبائر.
SubhanAllah, the whole day he is poor, miskin, fasting
يتلوى من شدة العطش والجوع.
And in pain from hunger and thirst, and then he breaks his fast a couple minutes early.
والمرأة تطبخ ويفسد نهارها هي تطبخ بالبخار من الدخان من الطعام وبعد ذلك صائم.
And the wife is tortured by the heat of the kitchen and the smoke and the steam in her face the whole day, and then she's
بين عذاب الطبخ والعطش
torturing herself with the hunger and thirst, and she's cooking for people who aren't fasting, and she breaks her fast early.
وهي تفطر في المطبخ الظهر من شدة الدخان ومن شدة شم تلك الروائح يدخل.
And from all of the steam that's entering her mouth, unguarded and without taking any means to stop it from going in her throat, she also breaks her fast unknowingly.
وهي تحسبها ما شاء الله.
She thinks she's fasting and she thinks she's
تطبخ الفطور للصوام.
I'm cooking a flaw for the people who are fasting.
Good woman, sister, ما شاء الله يجزاك الله خير. My wife, best wife. أفسد معها في الدنيا. My wife, best wife, she cook for all the world. يعني cook for. He's the worst wife, you know. Worst wife, you worst husband. If you go back to you شيطان. أنت not husband. You stupid, stupid son and daughter. You're not man. You stupid. Or you man, not man. I tell in English. أيها الرجال لستم رجالا. سنوقف هنا. I hate this man. أنا أكره الرجال.
هل ستذكر لهم علامات الفجر والمغرب؟
إن شاء الله. I'm very sad. حقيقة.
أنا محزن جدا.
والله. When I talk, people believe I'm a scream man. I'm very bad man. I'm worse. But what happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? Tell me. أنا أقول لكم والله الذي لا إله إلا هو إنسان عاقل. أنا مسلم ما مات غضبا للمسلمين هو بليد.
So I'm telling you, when you see me upset like this, I'll tell you the reality is I'm not upset. If a person knows these things and is seeing people, is so sad over seeing people messing up their fasting and messing up their prayer and worship and everything and so confused and lost. If a person knows this and is not dying of anger and sadness, then this person is a fool.
مجرم.
This person is a criminal.
مجرم. هذه خيانة للمسلمين.
This is a betrayal for the Muslims.
مالك قال بلغني أن العلماء تسأل كما تسأل الأنبياء.
Imam Malik said, it has reached me that the scholars...
بلاغات مالك معناها أحاديث.
When Imam Malik says that this has reached me, he means that this is authentic, this is a hadith. That he says that it has
بلغني
reached
أن
me
العلماء تسأل كما تسأل الأنبياء.
that the scholars will be asked like the prophets are asked.
هل بلغتم الأمم؟
Did you deliver the message to your people?
هل أعطيتم الدعوة صحيحة؟
Did you deliver the da'wah? Did you call to the people correctly?
هل كذبتم؟
Did you lie?
يوم يجمع الله الرسل فيقول ماذا أجبتم؟
The day
كل
that Allah
الأنبياء.
gathers the messengers and says,
ما هي الأجوبة؟
how were you responded to? What did
كل
the
واحد
people
يقول
say?
علي عمامة أنا شيخ أنا مفتي.
Everybody who can wear a turban says, I'm a sheikh and a mufti.
لكن ستسأل يا أخي
But you will be asked
عن شيئين عن الجهل وعن الدعوة.
about your ignorance and about your claims.
ناس تحض الناس على الفساد في الأرض.
People who are encouraging each other towards doing
وكل من
wrong.
قال غير هذا الشاذ وبعيد عن الحق
And anybody who tries to correct them, oh no, that person is deviant and that person is far from the
هذا
truth.
بعيد عن الدين وما عنده لطف بالمسلمين وسيء الأخلاق.
That person has bad manners. Oh, they don't care about the Muslims. Look how they are towards the Muslims.
هذا مصيبة في الدين. اللهم لا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا.